I think it starts to show by the number of people here that there are lots of people taking this issue very seriously indeed, perhaps despite what my friends in the media might be telling you. But perhaps not everyone understands just quite how serious. There's that famous George Bush Jr. quote, what's the problem with global warming? We can lower the temperature easily. We just follow Europe and switch to Celsius. I think this evening promises to be a little bit more serious than that, at least I hope it does. Environmental change didn't seem to most people to matter very much, but now I think it absolutely does. And the pace of demographic and technological development, and resource consumption too, has accelerated so fast that the effect on the climate has become, in many people's views, the most serious threat to our way of life, nothing less in many people's view. Now, that makes it the single most serious challenge that we have to face. And that means that it needs action, and it means that it needs action now. And action by scientists, and we haven't heard much mention of them yet tonight, for producing really clear analysis. Action by government to construct the best policy framework and make sure that they create an environment where and facilitate a contribution to the effort. But also action by consumers. That's you and me at home, in the office, everywhere else, to make sure that we engage in more and more efficient and more smarter ways. And that also means business playing its part. And today I'm focusing, and I suspect everybody else is too, on the element that business can actually do. Because there are plenty of very complex and politically serious policy debates underway. And I'm just going to say I think that there are key government policy areas and policy choices, if you like, with, as Jonathan says, implications for business. Most of you involved with business know that what business wants generally, above all, is certainty. But it also wants clarity, and that's true for all sorts of areas, but it's particularly true around this debate. Electricity market reform, EMR, was very slow to come through. Decisions on carbon pricing are long awaited, to say the least. And we need clarity, and not just clarity at some point, but clarity soon, in order that plans can start to be made and investment starts to come through. But business and people in business also like something else, and that's simplicity. And carbon pricing is, for many people, currently so complicated that if the mechanism is going to be understood or effective in helping to reduce emissions, people in government and policymakers really have to start making that comprehensible. Lots of very clever, or at least just clever, ordinary clever, but busy people in business need to be able to understand this without having to go into a darkened room with a cold towel around their heads to get their head round it. It isn't easy. How much renewable energy we want in the national portfolio over what timescale is a big question. So too is the debate around how to balance the needs of current energy-intensive users, how to get from here to there. Do we want a price so high that big, heavy energy users leak away with their carbon, but also with their jobs? Will they really move production to India and to China if they're faced with those charges? Now, my background in business has trained me, I think, to look wherever possible for the simplest course of action. And I always try to ask what simple, what practical steps can be taken to achieve what we want to do. So it's what can a business do? What can I do in my business? And how can I reduce or initiate in my company right now policies that are preferably going to not only reduce carbon, but also make money? And I'm going to say that I think it boils down to three I's. That's not 3I, it's 3 I's. Investment, innovation, and interest. Now, the investment in low-carbon technology, not just with a 5-year horizon of a particular chief executive or some shareholders, but looking much further forward to 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or much longer. And we need to be getting ready for what we want to have in place for our children, quite straightforwardly. And to push the button on that investment, we're going to have the policy framework and the pricing and the planning regime in this country and the certainty around that. If you take wind power, Siemens, a global leader in wind power technology, last year announced plans for an £80 million investment in the turbine manufacturing facility in Hull, which was going to bring about 700 jobs. It also has, many of you will know this better than I do, but equity in the wind farms themselves. And it's invested in R&D centres in Manchester, in Kiel and Sheffield, and a training centre in Newcastle. So this is well embedded into the economy. But last Thursday, we have announcements that Siemens might pull out of this because of what the Energy Secretary announced around changes to the feed-in tariffs. But then you get the Prime Minister moving pretty quickly to quash those fears, and there's an example of how the political class, perhaps you could say generously, eventually does get it right with the business sector. Now, the second example, the second I we're talking about is innovation. And that's a kind of good place for business to be. And the kind of thing we're looking at is the invention of products, of services that are going to be of help in the new era. And I came across one, just a slightly different one the other day, which just shows you where the distance away from the heartland, if you like, where some of these things can come through. There's an idea that I came across at Harvard that's being worked on at the moment, which, amongst other places, will have a huge application to a smart metered world. That's a world where privacy issues are going to start to loom quite large, because one of the things your smart meter will do is to make sure that things that you do in your home, or some of the things that you do in your home, are going to be available on the web, or available to somebody who will actually start to be able to get into the system, at least with your name and your address and other details. So a service called Three's a Crowd, and we can come back to that later about why it's called Three's a Crowd, is a service that's going to help protect privacy, encouraging consumers to participate in smart metering, where perhaps in the past they would have been much more reluctant to do so. Different example, and I declare my interest, Jonathan told you I'm a director of Centrica, is a British Gas example. It's been working with Ceres on a new household boiler, ready to cut carbon emissions by about 50% in the household. Looks a bit like a traditional, or very like a traditional boiler in size, but it's got a kind of CD case size fuel cell in it, which is going to be producing about 2.5 tonnes less CO2 per home, and the attractive bit for the consumer is reducing costs by about 25%. And that's a practical, here and now product that can get to market that's going to be one of the suite of things that helps us reduce that 15-year gap or that 20-year gap that I was talking about. The third I is that interest, and the interest is about, for the consumer. And engaging the consumer is something that the government may have some part in playing, but it's also for businesses to do. And we know that climate change has been on high up on that agenda for some time, and at the very top of it for some people. But there is no question, I think, right now that there's a fear that consumer climate change fatigue is setting in. And we need to make sure that consumers are seeing that those theoretical problems that they know about and read about are actually being addressed in the way that means that they can buy something, they can invest in something, they can do something that makes the difference and creates a market. Now, I'm talking largely from a UK perspective, but it's clear that here we've got brainy people, talent, and industry, manufacturing or otherwise, and the kind of organisations that can seize some of these challenges. And I have a very strong view that there is a lot to be done in innovation for wealth creation, the kind of tone that Jonathan was taking about where growth is going to come if we're able to harness this agenda at the same time. There are lots of people, and they're mostly not here tonight, I think, who can do the policy debates and the talking and the thinking around this. Certainly those of us in business will be very grateful for that. But it is the megatrend of that change and the need for decarbonisation in both domestic and industrial activity that's going to drive forward our response to the global threat. And I think in this country we have made a start, but I like that quote at the beginning because I do think we just have to get on with it. Thank you very much.